April 23, 1985. If you were around then, you probably remember exactly where you were.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you weren't, you've almost certainly heard the legend. It is a date that lives in what the Coca-Cola Company itself now calls marketing infamy.
It's a great phrase. And it really is the Kennedy assassination of the consumer packaged goods world.
That's a great way to put it.
Everyone remembers the shock. It was the day the Coca-Cola Company did the unthinkable.
Right.
They held this massive, glitzy press conference at Lincoln Center in New York City, all the lights, all the cameras, and announced they were scrapping the formula for the most popular soft drink in history.
I still find this story hard to wrap my head around, even after going through all these stacks of files we have here.
To what?
We were talking about Coca-Cola. It had been around for 99 years at that point.
Century, almost.
It wasn't just a soda. It was, it was an icon. It was Americana in a bottle, and they just decided to change it.
They didn't just change it. I think that's the key distinction we need to make right up front.
Okay.
They erased it. They stopped production on the original formula immediately.
Immediately.
This wasn't a line extension like Diet Coke, which was new, or Cherry Coke. This was a replacement.
So the old stuff was just gone.
Gone.
Yeah.
The new stuff.
Boo.
That was it. And that is what we are unpacking today. We're looking at the launch of New Coke.
Which, as you pointed out, was technically just called Coke on the can.
Right. The new was just on the corner, but everyone called it New Coke. And we're looking at its absolutely spectacular, historic failure.
But the mission here isn't just to point and laugh at a big corporate blunder, is it?
Well, maybe a little.
Don't get me wrong. It is fun to laugh at big corporations when they trip over their own shoelaces.
Of course.
But we want to get to the bottom of how this happened, because looking at the documents, this wasn't like a snap decision.
Not at all.
Nah.
The mission is to understand how a company with essentially unlimited resources, the smartest marketing minds in the business, and mountains, literal mountains of data could make such a colossal mistake.
Right.
And here's the twist we're going to get to by the end of this deep dive.
Right.
Why this failure might have actually been the single most important success in the company's history.
I love a good counterintuitive twist. It's like a business thriller where the victim turns out to be the winner.
Exactly.
So we're digging into historical accounts. We've got the actual market research data from the early 80s, and we're looking at all the retrospectives on the Cola Wars.
We are. And I think we need to frame this correctly from the start. This isn't just a business story.
It feels bigger than that.
It is. If you look at it closely, it's a story about psychology. It's about regional identity, specifically the deep-seated pride in the American South. And it's about the massive, often ignored gap between what people say they want in a survey.
And what they actually want in real life.
Precisely.
So let's get into the why, because the assumption, I think, for most people looking back at the 80s is that Coke was king.
Right. That's what everyone thinks.
I always picture the 80s as the era of Coke dominance. Like, wasn't Coke always on top? Why would you ever mess with perfection if you were winning?
That is the nostalgia talking. It's the Mean Joe Green commercial effect.
Oh, I loved that ad.
We all did. We remember the ads, so we assumed the business was healthy. But the reality of the early 1980s was very, very different. Coke was a brand in crisis.
A crisis? Really?
Oh, yeah. If you look at the internal memos and the annual reports from 1983 and 1984, they paint a pretty grim picture for the executives down in Atlanta.
Grim how? I'm looking at the chart here. And they still had the lead, didn't they?
They had the lead, but look at the trend line.
Okay.
That's what terrifies a CEO.
Yeah.
Let's look at the post-World War II era. In the late 40s and 50s, Coke had something like 60% of the market share.
60%.
They were the default. If you said soda, you meant Coke. But by 1983,
Well, was it then?
that number had plummeted to under 24%.
Wow. Okay, I knew it had dropped. But from 60 to 24, that is a free fall. That's losing more than half your empire.
It is a hemorrhage.
Yeah.
And the main culprit was Pepsi.
The Pepsi challenge.
Pepsi had been hammering away at them for a decade with the Pepsi challenge. In fact, by the early 80s, Pepsi was actually outselling Coke in supermarkets.
Wait, hold on. Pepsi was outselling Coke in stores. I did not realize it had gotten that bad. I thought Coke always had the edge.
It had the edge in overall volume, but you have to dissect where that volume comes from.
Okay.
Coke dominated vending machines and fountain sales, specifically their exclusive deals with fast food giants like McDonald's.
Right.
If you go to McDonald's, you drink Coke. You don't have a choice. That's what they call a forced choice market.
And I'm not going to walk out of a McDonald's just because they don't have Pepsi. I'll just take the Coke.
Exactly. But if you took away the restaurants and the vending machines and just looked at the free choice market,
People in a grocery aisle.
people standing in a grocery aisle, looking at two bottles and deciding which one to put in their cart.
Coke was losing.
Coke was losing. They were losing the battle for the consumer's preference.
So they were winning on distribution muscle, but losing the heart and, I guess, the palate of the drinker.
Precisely. And the demographics were even more terrifying for them.
How so?
I was reading through the analyst reports from '83, and they were looking at the baby boomers. As the boomers aged, they were moving toward diet drinks or coffee or juices.
So the full sugar cola market was shrinking.
It was. So the future of that market was the youth market.
And let me guess, the kids were drinking Pepsi.
The kids were drinking Pepsi.
Of course they were.
Pepsi had successfully positioned itself as the drink of the new generation. They had Michael Jackson lighting up the screen.
Sometimes literally.
Sometimes literally, yes. They had Lionel Richie. They had energy and youth. Coke felt old.
It felt like your parents' drink.
Exactly. It felt like your parents' drink. It felt like Eisenhower-era America in a neon 80s world.
Yeah.
So you have a declining market share, a competitor that's cooler than you, and a customer base that's aging out.
Okay, so into this burning building walks Roberto Goizueta.
The new CEO.
Right. I was reading his bio, and he's such a fascinating figure in this story because he doesn't fit the mold of the good old boy Atlanta executive.
Not at all. Roberto Goizueta became CEO in 1980. He was a Cuban exile who had fled Castro's regime. And he was not a sentimental man.
No.
He was a chemist by training, not a marketer. He came from a technical background where results mattered more than tradition. He looked at a formula as a chemical compound, not a holy relic.
He had that famous line to his staff, right? About sacred cows?
Yes, that's the key to his entire mindset. He gathered his top executives and told them there would be no sacred cows.
Meaning?
Nothing was off the table. If it wasn't making money or if it could be improved, he was willing to change it. He basically said, we are not a museum, we are a business.
And you have to understand his history, too. He'd run the Coca-Cola subsidiary in the Bahamas before this.
Right.
What happened in the Bahamas? That seems like a pretty good gig if you can get it.
Laughs. It was a good gig, but he used it as a laboratory. He improved sales there significantly by tweaking the flavor of the drink to match local tastes.
Really? He changed the formula there?
He did. He added a little more sugar, changed the carbonation levels.
Yeah.
He had seen firsthand that if you adjust the formula to match what the people currently want, you can boost profits.
So he didn't have this reverence for the secret formula that the public assumed the CEO of Coca-Cola would have?
None. He saw it as a variable, not a constant.
That makes so much sense. So he's looking at the data, seeing the global decline, and thinking, I fixed this before by changing the recipe. Why not do it again on a global scale?
He was willing to break the glass. He was willing to blow up the building if it meant saving the company. He believed that the product itself, the liquid in the bottle, was the problem.
Not the marketing, not the brand image, the actual taste.
The taste. He thought people prefer the taste of Pepsi. Therefore, we must make our product taste more like Pepsi. It's a very logical chemist brain deduction.
So this kicks off the secret mission. Project Kansas. I love the code names from the 80s.
Project Kansas. It was named after a famous photo of a journalist, William Allen White, drinking a Coke. A little piece of trivia for you.
I like that.
This was a top-secret initiative led by marketing VP Sergio Zyman and Brian Dyson. Their mandate was simple but terrifying.
Yeah.
Create a flavor that beats Pepsi.
And this is the part that I think gets lost in the Coke was stupid narrative. They didn't just guess, right?
Oh, God, no.
They didn't just mix a bucket of syrup in a back room and say, yeah, that's good. They tested the living daylights out of this.
Oh, they tested it more than almost any product in history up to that point. This is where the tragedy of the data comes in.
Okay.
They ran blind taste tests with nearly 200,000 consumers.
200,000.
200,000. Just think about the logistics of that in 1984. No internet, no digital surveys. This is clipboard and paperwork in malls across America.
That is a sample size that would make a medical researcher jealous. You usually launch a drug with way less data than that.
Exactly. And the results were overwhelmingly positive. The new formula, which was sweeter and smoother, it had less of that bite or burn that the original Coke had.
It was designed to be more like Pepsi.
It was, and it beat everything. It beat the original Coke by a solid margin. It beat Pepsi.
Even in the South. Because I know we're going to talk about the backlash, but surely the South held the line during the testing.
That's the thing. They didn't. That's what was so convincing to the executives.
Wow.
Even in the Southeast, even in Atlanta, Coke's hometown, people preferred the new flavor in blind tests. The data said, unequivocally, this tastes better.
So if I'm Goizueta and I'm looking at this spreadsheet with 200,000 data points,
You feeling pretty good?
I'm thinking, checkmate. We found a product that beats our competitor and our own old product. It seems like a no-brainer.
It does. It looks like the perfect business decision. But, and there is always a but in these stories,
There always is.
there were warning signs in the qualitative data that they chose to ignore.
What do you mean by qualitative?
I mean, the feelings, the emotions. They were so focused on the quantitative, the numbers, the percentages, that they missed the emotional cues.
What specifically did they miss? Because I saw a mention of focus groups going wrong.
Well, most of the tests were blind, right? Here is cup A, here is cup B, which do you like?
Simple.
But they also did focus groups where they would reveal to the testers what they were drinking. They'd say, okay, this new one you like, that's going to be the new Coca-Cola, and we are taking the old one away.
That's a bold move to tell them you're taking the old one away. Usually companies just add to the line.
Right. And for most people, surprisingly, the preference actually went up.
It did.
Yeah, they liked the idea of a new and improved Coke. They bought into the marketing hype before it even launched. But there was this small group, about 10 to 12% of the participants.
The angry minority.
The angry minority.
Yeah.
These people didn't just dislike the idea, they felt alienated, they were furious.
What were they saying?
Things like, I might stop drinking Coke altogether. They talked about it like a betrayal.
But looking at it from a boardroom perspective, 10% isn't a majority.
Right.
In a democracy, if you win 90% of the vote, that's a landslide. You pop the champagne.
That is exactly how the executives saw it. They looked at the raw numbers, they thought, okay, we lose 10% of the diehards, but we gain the Pepsi generation. Net positive.
But they missed something.
They missed the social dynamic. In these focus groups, the angry 10% were so vocal, so passionate, that they started to sway the other people in the room.
It's the loudest voice in the room syndrome.
It is. They exerted this peer pressure effect. The negativity was contagious. A person who 5 minutes ago said, yeah, this new stuff's pretty good, would hear the angry guy ranting about tradition and the good old days.
And suddenly they'd change their mind.
Suddenly they'd say, you know what? He's right. This is terrible. Why are you doing this?
That's fascinating. So the spreadsheet says 90% approval, but the room vibe says riot.
Exactly.
And the executives weren't in the room. They were just looking at the report summaries.
Correct. And the company actively downplayed that psychological reaction. They focused on the sip tests, the raw preference. They thought, once people get used to it, the anger will fade. It's just the shock of the new.
I have to ask the obvious question here, though. Did they ever consider just selling both?
They did.
Like, keep old Coke and launch new Coke as Coke Supreme or something? Why did it have to be a Highlander situation where there can be only one?
It's a great question, and they did consider it. It wasn't completely off the radar, but management rejected it for a few very specific tactical reasons.
Okay, like what?
First, their bottlers were already furious with them.
Why are the bottlers mad?
Complexity. Coke had just launched Diet Coke in 1982, which was a huge hit, but a logistical nightmare.
A new product, new cans, new everything.
And they were launching Cherry Coke around the same time in 1985. The bottlers, the guys who owned the trucks and the factories, were screaming, we don't have enough shelf space, we don't have enough trucks. They didn't want another SKU to manage.
Right, the bottlers are the ones who actually have to put the liquid in the jars and drive the trucks to the Piggly Wiggly. They are the boots on the ground.
Right. And there was a lot of legal tension, too. Bottlers were suing Coca-Cola over syrup pricing contracts. It was a messy time.
So adding another product would have just made things worse.
Much worse. Plus, the marketing team feared cannibalization.
Cannibalization.
It's when your new product eats the sales of your old product. They worry that if you have two Cokes, you split your own market share, you dilute the brand, and suddenly Pepsi looks even bigger by comparison because your sales are split between two buckets.
So Goizueta makes the call. He pushes all the chips to the center of the table.
He makes the decree. New Coke or no Coke. It had to be a total replacement. He wanted to show confidence. He insisted on the new label. He genuinely believed this was the future and that keeping the old stuff was just clinging to a dying past.
So April 23, 1985, the big day, Lincoln Center. The invites go out.
It was a spectacle. But Pepsi, you have to hand it to Pepsi, they played this beautifully.
How so? They knew it was coming.
Oh, they knew. The beverage industry is leaky. They had spies or just good industry intel from suppliers. They knew Coke was changing the formula, so they poisoned the well.
That sounds ominous. How do you poison the well for a soda launch?
They started shaping the narrative before Coke even said a word. They declared victory.
Before the launch?
The day of the launch, before the press conference. They gave their employees the day off. They ran full-page ads saying Pepsi won the cola wars. They framed Coke's change not as an improvement, but as a desperate admission of defeat.
That is 4D chess right there. So by the time Goizueta walks on stage, the reporters are already primed to be cynical.
Exactly. And they fed reporters questions to ask. So when Goizueta stands up there trying to describe the flavor as bolder, rounder, more harmonious...
More harmonious. That sounds like he's describing a symphony, not a soda.
Laughs. He was trying to elevate it. He was a sophisticated man. But the reporters were skeptical. They asked point blank, is this an admission that the old Coke was bad?
And what did he say?
Goizueta got defensive. He refused to say the word taste test. He refused to admit that Pepsi forced their hand.
So he didn't give a straight answer?
No. He said the secret formula wasn't sacrosanct. He pointed out that they had changed the formula back in 1935 to make it kosher.
I didn't know that. They changed it for religious reasons.
Yes, they made tweaks for kosher certification removing tallow and glycerin derived from beef and later for halal and vegetarian compliance.
So his argument was, we've done this before.
His argument was, we tweak things all the time. This is just another tweak. But he refused to admit that consumer preference drove the decision. He famously called it one of the easiest decisions we've ever made.
Oof. That is a quote that aged like milk, one of the easiest decisions.
And here's the supreme irony of the launch. For years, Coke had been using Bill Cosby as their spokesman.
Right.
And Cosby's whole pitch, his entire shtick in the commercials, was that Coke was less sweet than Pepsi. He used to say it wasn't cloying. He called it the real thing because it had that bite.
So now they're launching a sweeter drink.
Now, suddenly, Coke is launching a drink that is specifically sweeter to compete with Pepsi.
They completely undermined their own marketing history. They basically said, hey, remember how we told you for 10 years that sweet is bad? Just kidding. Sweet is good now.
They did. But, and here's where it gets really interesting and where the data gets confusing again.
On.
Despite the awkward press conference, the launch was initially a success.
Really? Because the legend says it was a disaster from day one?
Yeah.
I picture people throwing cans at the screen immediately.
No, that's the myth that is built up over time. In the first few days, the Coca-Cola stock price actually went up.
Wall Street liked it.
Wall Street liked the move. Market research showed 80% of the public knew about the change within 48 hours, which is insane market penetration for pre-internet days.
That's huge.
And sales in cities like New York, Miami, and Detroit went up by 8%.
So people were buying it, they were curious.
They were buying it. They were drinking it. 75% of respondents in early surveys said they'd buy it again. They were giving it away at the Statue of Liberty renovation celebration. It was in McDonald's. If you looked at the spreadsheets in May 1985, a month after launch, it looked like the gamble worked.
So where did the rebellion start? Because we know it ends with burning effigies in the streets. At some point, the mood shifted.
It started where Coke began, the American South.
Of course. Talk to me about the Southern reaction. Why was it so different there? I mean, soda is soda, right?
Not in the South. You have to understand that in the South, Coca-Cola isn't just a carbonated beverage.
What is it?
It's Coca-Cola. It's a food group. It's part of the cultural fabric. It was invented in Atlanta. It's a point of regional pride.
Okay.
For many Southerners, seeing a New York-based competitor like Pepsi force Coke to change, it was viewed through a very specific historical prism.
Are you going to say the Civil War?
I am absolutely saying the Civil War. I know it sounds hyperbolic to us now, but some people genuinely viewed it as a cultural surrender to the Yankees.
Wow.
Pepsi is based in Purchase, New York. Coke is Atlanta. To change the formula to taste like Pepsi felt like a betrayal of Southern heritage. It felt like Atlanta was surrendering to New York values.
That is heavy for a drink that costs 50 cents. But identity is powerful stuff.
It is the most powerful stuff. And once the South started screaming, the rest of the country started listening. And the anecdotes of rage are just. They are colorful.
Okay, give me one.
Goizueta received a letter addressed to Chief Dodo, the Coca-Cola Company.
Chief Dodo. Simple, effective, insulting. I like it.
Another customer wrote in asking for Goizueta's autograph.
Because they were a fan. Maybe they liked the new taste.
No. They explained that the signature of one of the dumbest executives in American business history would be valuable to collectors someday.
That is deeply premeditated insult. I respect that.
The company hotline 1-800-GET-COKE went into meltdown. Before the change, they got maybe 400 calls a day.
Just normal customer service stuff.
Right. Where can I buy this?
Yeah.
Or my can was dented. Suddenly, they were getting 1,500 calls a day. And these weren't just complaints.
What were they?
They hired a psychiatrist to listen in on the hotline calls to analyze the consumer sentiment.
Seriously?
Yes. And the psychiatrist reported that people sounded like they were discussing the death of a family member. They were grieving. They felt a genuine sense of loss. They weren't angry about a flavor. They were sad that a piece of their childhood was gone.
It goes back to that emotional attachment the data missed. You can't quantify childhood memory in a blind taste test.
You can't. And it wasn't just average citizens. Fidel Castro,
The Cuban leader.
Goizueta's nemesis, essentially came out and bashed New Coke. He called it a sign of American capitalist decadence.
That's amazing.
He said the Americans had lost their way so badly they couldn't even keep their sodas straight.
Wait, Goizueta's father was a Cuban exile, right? He must have hated that.
Yes. And Goizueta later said that was the only time his father ever agreed with Fidel Castro.
What?
They both hated New Coke.
You know you've messed up when you're uniting the Goizueta family and Fidel Castro on a policy issue.
It was the great unifier. And then you have Gay Mullins. You cannot tell this story without Gay Mullins.
The Seattle retiree, I was reading about him. He seems like a character written for a movie.
He really does. He was a retiree looking to start a PR firm, and he saw this as his moment. He founded the Old Cola Drinkers of America.
And he sued them, right?
He launched a class action lawsuit to force the company to bring back the old formula. He was on TV dumping New Coke into the sewers of Seattle. He became the face of the resistance.
But there's a funny footnote about him in the research, right? A little bit of irony.
A huge irony alert. Mullins participated in a blind taste test later on, challenged by a TV station, and he failed.
He failed.
He either couldn't tell the difference, or in some takes, he actually preferred New Coke.
Laughs. No way!
So the leader of the revolution didn't even know what he was fighting for.
He was fighting for the idea of old Coke.
Ah.
He wasn't fighting for the liquid. That is the crucial distinction that Goizueta missed. The liquid didn't matter. The idea mattered.
So consumer rage is exploding. The media is piling on. But Coke is a big ship to turn around. What finally made them pivot? Was it the letters? Was it Gay Mullins?
It wasn't just the consumers. I think the real pivot point was the bottlers.
The bottlers
We
again.
mentioned them earlier. These are the local business people who live in these communities. They were getting hammered. They were being socially ostracized.
Like at the country club or at church.
Everywhere. Friends, family. Bottlers reported that people were angry at them personally.
At the bottlers.
Yes. There's a story about a bottler in Georgia who said a woman came up to him at a church picnic and accused him of ruining her bridge club. She wouldn't speak to him. You do not mess with the bridge club. That is a sacred institution.
Laughs. It sounds funny, but it was affecting their livelihood. Drivers were getting yelled at while delivering to supermarkets.
So they were getting it from all sides.
On June 23rd, there was a meeting where bottlers confronted the executives in Atlanta. They basically said, "You are killing us out here. You need to fix this."
And then there's the story about Donald Kioff, the president of Coke. This feels like the cinematic turning point.
This is the aha moment. Kioff is in Monaco, of all places, visiting a small restaurant.
Monaco. Fancy.
Right, and the owner comes up to him, beaming with pride, and serves him a chilled 6.5-ounce glass bottle of Coca-Cola. And the owner says, "I serve the real thing, a real Coke."
And Kioff realizes?
He realizes the brand is bigger than the company. He realizes they aren't selling a flavor, they are selling a memory. They're selling consistency. And if they don't fix this, they are going to lose that magic forever.
The owner in Monaco didn't care about market share or sweetness.
He cared about the real thing.
So the timeline here is shockingly short. Launch in April. By July, they are reversing course.
79 days. That is all it lasted. Less than 3 months.
Wow.
On July 11th, 1985, they hold another press conference.
And this was big news. This wasn't just a business page footnote.
Huge. Peter Jennings interrupted General Hospital on ABC with a special bulletin.
You know it's a crisis when you interrupt the soaps in the 80s. That is peak viewing time.
A national emergency. Senator David Pryor went to the floor of the U.S. Senate and called it a meaningful moment in U.S. history.
For a soda coming back, that is wild.
For a soda. The hotline received 31,600 calls in 2 days after the announcement.
31,000.
But this time, they weren't angry. They were joyful. Executives said it was like they had cured cancer. People were weeping with relief.
So they bring back the original formula, but they don't call it Coca-Cola anymore, right?
Right. This is the branding pivot. They bring it back as Coca-Cola Classic,
Classic.
and they keep new Coke on the shelves, just labeled as Coke. Later it will be renamed Coke too.
And there is that famous quote from Kioff when people started asking if this was all a giant conspiracy. Because naturally people thought, did they do this on purpose?
Of course.
It's the first place your mind goes.
And Q gave the perfect answer. We're not that dumb, and we're not that smart.
Which is probably the most honest corporate statement ever made.
It really is. It sums up the whole debacle perfectly. It was a blunder, not a scheme.
So I want to go back to the why for a second. We talked about the focus groups, but there is some deeper psychology here. I was reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, as part of the prep for this, and he devotes a whole chapter to this.
Yes. Gladwell argues that the central flaw wasn't the data itself, but the methodology of the taste test.
The sip test. I found this fascinating because it relates to biology.
Exactly. Explain what happens in a sip test.
So when you take a sip of something, just a tiny bit in a Dixie cup, your brain naturally prefers the sweeter option. It's a biological reaction to a sugar rush. It triggers the reward center immediately. Pepsi is sweeter. New Coke was formulated to be sweeter. So in a sip test, they win.
Right. But, and this is the key, we don't drink soda by the sip. We drink a whole can or a whole bottle.
And that's called a home use test. And the biology changes.
Absolutely.
When you drink a whole can of something that sweet, it can become cloying. It becomes too much. The sip test is a sprint. Drinking a Coke is a marathon. Coke was designed for the marathon. It has more acid, more bite, less sugar impact.
But they tested it for a sprint.
Yes. They optimized the product for the wrong environment. They optimized it for the test, not for the living room.
That makes so much sense. And then there's the packaging. You sent me that note about sensation transference.
Yes, this is a concept by Louis Cheskin, a famous marketing psychologist. He argued that people don't separate the product from the packaging in their minds.
They merge them.
Exactly. They transfer their feelings about the box or the can onto the taste itself.
Can you give an example of how that works?
Sure. Cheskin did research on 7-Up in the 40s. They found that if they put the exact same 7-Up liquid in a bottle with a slightly more yellow label, people swore it tasted more lemony.
No way.
If the label was green, they tasted more lime.
The brain is so easily tricked, we taste with our eyes.
We do. So apply that to Coke. The consumers believed the product was the red can, the Spencerian script logo, the history, the shape of the bottle.
There's a whole package of sensations.
Right. When you changed the definition of the product, when you said, this isn't that thing you love anymore, it's something new, you broke the sensation transference. You severed the link. So it actually tasted worse to them because the psychological seasoning was gone.
Wow.
There was also a theory I read about called the just noticeable difference. It suggests they could have just changed the flavor slowly, right? Like boiling a frog.
The flavor balance hypothesis,
Yeah.
yes. Later studies showed that if Coke had just gradually tweaked the formula over 5 years, added a little more sugar in 1980, changed the acid balance in 1982, no one would have noticed.
And they would have gotten to the same place.
They could have arrived at the new Coke flavor without the new Coke launch.
But they didn't want to do that.
No. Goizueta wanted a big splash. He wanted the headlines. He wanted the new label to attract the youth. That was hubris. He wanted the credit for the change, and that's what killed it.
Now, we have to talk conspiracy theories.
We do.
Because even today, if you mention New Coke at a party, someone, usually the uncle who thinks he knows everything, will say, oh, they did it on purpose to switch to corn syrup?
The high fructose corn syrup theory. It is the most persistent myth in business history.
So break it down. What's the theory?
The theory is that sugar was expensive, corn syrup was cheap, so they used New Coke as a distraction to switch the original formula from cane sugar to corn syrup while no one was looking.
Is there any truth to it? Because logically, it sounds plausible.
It sounds plausible, but the timeline just, it destroys it. The switch had already happened.
Before New Coke.
Way before. Coke started allowing bottlers to use corn syrup in 1980, 5 years before New Coke. By 1985, almost all bottlers in the U.S. were already using 100% HFCS in the old Coke.
So when people were hoarding old Coke in 1985, filling their basements with cases of the good stuff,
They were already hoarding corn syrup Coke. For the most part, yes. Unless they were importing it from Mexico, They were fighting for a formula that had already changed regarding the sweetener.
They were fighting for the brand, not the sugar.
Exactly.
What about the classic spike theory, that they broke it on purpose just so they could bring back the original and get a sales bump, like a new and improved strategy but in reverse?
People love to believe corporations are playing 4D chess, plotting these master strokes.
It's more fun that way.
It is, but look at the chaos we just described. Bottlers were revolting, stock prices eventually wobbled, the executives were being publicly humiliated. Kiev's quote stands, "We're not that smart." No company risks their entire existence on a bank shot strategy like that. It's too dangerous.
So it was an accidental victory, not a planned one.
Exactly. Roger Enrico, the CEO of Pepsi, called it the Edsel of the 80s. He said if they had fired people over it, it would have destroyed the culture of risk-taking at Coke.
But they didn't fire anyone, did they?
No one. Here's the amazing part. They didn't fire anyone. Goizueta kept his job. Simon kept his job.
And in the end, it worked out for them.
In a weird way, yes. Sales of Coca-Cola Classic skyrocketed. By the end of 1985, Coke was blowing Pepsi out of the water. It reestablished Coke as the dominant cola.
It reminded people why they loved it.
As Sergio Simon later said, New Coke was a success because it revitalized the brand and reattached the public to Coke.
Talk about spinning a failure. That is world-class spin.
It is a good spin, but he's not wrong. Before New Coke, Coke was just a soda. After New Coke, it was an American treasure that you had to fight to protect.
Before we wrap up, we have to mention the pop culture legacy.
Yes.
Because New Coke didn't just disappear, it had a weird afterlife.
Tax headroom.
The computer-generated guy, I barely remember him, but he's so 80s.
Played by Matt Frewer in prosthetics, actually, not computer-generated.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And Coke used him to market Coke 2, or the New Coke, to the youth market. The slogan was, "Catch the Wave." And surprisingly, that campaign was huge.
See, catch the wave. Even I know that tagline.
It had 76% awareness among teenagers. It was actually a very successful ad campaign for a very unsuccessful product. It kept New Coke on life support for years.
And then weirdly Stranger Things brought it back recently.
In 2019, Season 3 was set in the summer of 1985. So naturally, the kids are arguing about New Coke.
Right. Lucas loves it. Mike hates it.
It was a perfect period detail. And Coke actually partnered with Netflix and did a limited production run of the New Coke formula.
Did people like it this time? Or did they hate it again?
That is the funniest part. Reviews were surprisingly friendly. Our palates have changed.
How so?
We're used to sweeter drinks now because of the explosion of energy drinks and frappuccinos. One reporter said, tastes like what's normal now.
So Goizueta wasn't wrong. He was just 34 years too early.
He was a visionary, just a visionary with bad timing and terrible execution.
So let's unpack the final takeaway here. We had this massive company, perfect data, unlimited money, and a disaster.
Well, New Coke failed as a product, as a liquid in a can.
Right.
But it succeeded as a marketing event. It inadvertently proved that a brand is not a set of physical attributes. A brand is a relationship. It's an emotion.
You can't put nostalgia on a spreadsheet.
No, you can't. And that brings me to the big question I think listeners should chew on.
Okay.
We live in a world today that is obsessed with data. Big data. AI algorithms, A/B testing everything to death.
Absolutely. Everything is optimized.
Coke had the perfect data. The blind taste test didn't lie. People liked the taste better. But the data missed the context. It missed the humanity. So my question is, what other perfect data are companies following today that is completely missing the human element? What are we optimizing for? Efficiency, sweetness, clicks, that is actually stripping away the soul of the things we love.
That is a terrifying thought. Are we optimizing the flavor but losing the feeling?
Exactly. Sometimes the worst product is the one people actually want because of what it represents.
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to go grab a Coke. A classic one.
Make it a glass bottle. It tastes better.
Always. Thanks for diving in with us.
A pleasure.
And thank you for listening. See you in the next one.